Mercury retrograde, a lot of people dread them. I'm not really surprised, I dread them sometimes. The middle one of 2020 goes from June the 18th to July the 12th. We've actually had a pre-shadow going on from June the 2nd to the 18th of June, and there'll be a post-shadow afterwards from July the 12th to the 26th. So it's pretty much affecting all of June and July 2020. But the main meaty part of it, if you will, is June the 18th to July the 12th. It's all happening in Cancer this time, though. Mercury's going to be in Cancer throughout, and that includes the pre-shadow and the post-shadow. And Mercury is fairly comfortable in the sign of Cancer, so there isn't as much friction going on there. And there are other reasons why this might not be such a bad one. They always affect travel, transport and communication somehow. No getting away from it, and I would really look out for things like that. Make your plans very carefully. Travel, transport, actually all part of communication. You could just sum it up as communication, really. Electronics are a bit vulnerable to Mercury retrograde. It's always the case. But this one isn't looking so bad. Let's take a look at why. It has to do with the actual universe that Mercury is passing through and the way the feel of astrology is within the universe at that time. It makes no real planetary aspect in this retrograde, but it is under the influence of the brightest star in the sky, which is Sirius. It's a fixed star. It's a very reliable star, and so that brings a lot of light into the situation that we wouldn't always expect to find in Mercury retrograde. There are also aspects going on with some of the asteroids, which again make it not so bad. The Sirius side of it actually portends business success and honour, renown, wealth, that kind of thing, so very positive. But the other side of the positive influences comes from an asteroid which is closely associated with wisdom, prudence, patience, you might say, and deep thought. So there really is a lot of kind of deeply felt honour about this whole thing, and it's very unlikely to screw things up in a bad way. I think we're looking at fairly minor glitches, mostly to do with communication, and those won't go away. They're quite positive, really, because they teach us about shadows in our awareness, particularly around how we deal with other people, but how we deal with life generally. For example, a car breaking down, a thing like that. And mine has actually gone wobbly during the pre-shadow, so I think that might be making its presence felt as we go through the retrograde. It just, suddenly you don't go and see people that you were going to go and see. And of course the whole world is going through various restrictions about the pandemic at the moment. It's going to deepen our awareness of those issues. It's going to make us more aware, even more aware than we already are, of what those people mean to us. The asteroid involved here is called Metis, and Metis was named after the Greek goddess of wisdom, prudence and deep thought. This is where it kind of gets deep, and this is where it gets actually very sensible, really. Metis was the first wife of Zeus, which is who's involved with Jupiter, and also the mother of Athena, Pallas Athena as we call her in astrology, and Pallas and Athena and everything to do with that also relates to Juno, also relates to Ceres, also relates to Vesta, and can have a very positive effect on domestic matters, sometimes by shaking things up. But generally speaking, it's worth going through the shake-ups that happen with astrology, because it's all part of the old religions used to call it the cure of the soul. That's kind of a very fancy way of putting it, but doesn't mean so much making the soul better, curing an illness with the soul. It's like curing meat, or curing anything that you're actually physically making. It matures, it gets better, its understanding sort of tends to grow. Meat doesn't understand things, does it? But I'm sure you know what I mean. It's all very curative and it's all very helpful. And asteroid Metis, it's about intelligence, wisdom, deep thought, prudence, which I think I've covered already, really. Good judgment as well. Power, wise counsel. You might find people who are able to help you understand things in new ways during this. Skill, craft, magical cunning, and also tricksters. But tricksters are an interesting one because they always teach us something. They really do. It's a bit like the way big technology firms will actually pay gifted hackers to try and get into their system and find out if there's anything that needs to be fixed. And actually, by doing that, by actually inviting the tricksters in, great things happen, because you know the IT systems of these companies become maybe not impregnable, but a lot closer to impregnable. So that trickster aspect really is no bad thing. Now, as for the Mercury in Cancer side of this, that has been the case all through the post-shadow and all through the pre-shadow, I'm sorry, and it will continue to be the case all the way through to the end of the post-shadow. It's in Cancer all the way. The pre-shadow began on the 2nd of June at 5 degrees 29 minutes of Cancer and went, well, going on really until the actual retrograde station, and the station is the time when Mercury stands still prior to starting to move backwards. It doesn't actually move backwards, as I've very often said. It's all about how we see Mercury or any of the retrograde planets, because they all do it apart from the Sun and Moon. It's how we visualize these things from Earth, and as we're watching the planet, it goes in a straight line and then it kind of goes like that. It's always moving upwards, it's always moving forwards, but as we view it from Earth, it appears to move backwards a bit for a while, and with Mercury retrograde that tends to be about 3 weeks. So then Mercury actually, as it stations retrogrades, when it stops moving that way and actually is just about to start moving that way but hasn't quite started yet, that's going to be 14 degrees of Cancer, and then Mercury is going to move back through the retrograde back to 5 degrees of Cancer, and then in the post shadow, when Mercury stations direct again, when it's finished moving backwards, just before it starts moving forwards, that is going to take it from 5 degrees, no it's not, it's going to take it, is it? Yes, it's going to take it back from 5 degrees to 14 degrees of Cancer. So Mercury stays in Cancer throughout, and that really is not a bad thing. That is why we can be pretty sure that the lessons we get from this retrograde are going to come in a way that we can digest them, that we can handle them, and maybe we can even actually get the feel for what's going on before we come out the end of it. It's usually the end of Mercury retrograde, when it's all finished, that we think, oh yeah, that's what it was teaching me. I think we're actually going to get those lessons, get them in our heart, digest them, understand them, well before we get to the end of the retrograde. So it shouldn't be a confusing one, this. It's looking quite positive. There are other planetary retrogrades and other events in astrology going on. Of course, we have got the solar eclipse on the 21st of June, which is only kind of 3 days and maybe like 2.5 days into the retrograde. And that is an epoch-making solar eclipse. I did a video about that the other day. Check it out on my YouTube channel, Astro Truth, or elsewhere on this platform. This goes out on loads of platforms, so just check out my page wherever you're looking at me, and you'll find that video. There is also a lunar eclipse on the 5th of July, where we kind of have a clear out of things, and so they're very early actually in this Mercury retrograde, and they will be a part of characterizing it. Also, let me see, Venus is just about to finish her retrograde on the 25th of June. So for the first few days of Mercury retrograde, Venus will be retrograde as well. And there we're looking at matters certainly around love, around the divine feminine, also around money and in business, anything to do with business. We'll see some changes with that as Venus comes out of retrograde. Let me see, Jupiter is retrograde throughout it, Saturn is retrograde throughout it, Neptune goes retrograde on the 23rd, so for a very short time between the 23rd and the 25th, both Neptune and Venus are going to be retrograde. Pluto is retrograde throughout the whole thing, and just before it ends actually, on the 11th of July, Chiron goes retrograde. Chiron representing the wounded healer, if you will, that side of us that wants to give out healing and is sometimes thwarted, sometimes in quite a painful way, usually in quite a difficult way. Chiron retrograde is coming in, and that will expose issues around healing in a particularly strong way, I should think, because of all the other retrogrades going on. Let me see, Juno is actually... No, Juno has actually gone direct in May, so that's nothing to worry about. What am I talking about? She is actually one of the daughters of Pallas Athena. That's why I thought of that one. And as we're talking about 5 degrees of Cancer at the beginning and end of this retrograde, it's worth mentioning the fixed star Tejat Posterior. I don't know if I've pronounced posterior right, but I don't know if I've pronounced Tejat right. Tejat, something like that. But it's a fixed star, and it's always at 5 degrees and 34 minutes of Cancer, and that gives force, energy, power, protection, the ability to express ideas in a reasonable way that gets your point across, just because of the obvious intelligence of what you're talking about. That is going to show through in arguments and in conversations. So that's really positive. And that is going on at 5 degrees and 34 minutes of Cancer. So that is going to be an influence pretty well all the way through. You know, Mercury moves up to 14 degrees and back again. But that 5 degrees of Cancer position is really very significant. So there we are. That is Mercury retrograde of June and July 2020. Other momentous things going on all over the place. It's a very busy year in astrology, and we are actually looking at profound changes in the world as a result of it, actually. There are 6 eclipses, for example, in this year, which tends to indicate a difficult year, an awkward year. But certainly a year of change, that's the main thing. And goodness me, the world could do with change, could it not? Right, that's that one then. Thanks very much for watching. Thumbs up, please, if you've enjoyed it. If you're on YouTube now, please subscribe to my channel. If you're not on YouTube now, go over to Astro Truth on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel, because there's more videos coming all the time. Leave me a comment too. It's always great to share the journey, and it helps me zero in to who I'm actually making these videos for. Meanwhile, have a good Mercury retrograde. That's a crazy sounding thing to say, but you really can this time. Could be quite prosperous for quite a lot of people, and it's one of the easiest Mercury retrogrades I've ever seen in all the time I've been doing astrology. So really positive. Have a good one then. Take care of yourselves. See you again soon. Peace.